Oh.
Wow, nice. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Unreal Engine live stream. I'm your host, Alexander Pascal, but the star of the show today is Tim Hobson, who's going to be talking about Destructibles in Unreal Engine. We are in 4.15 today, so make sure that if you're going to be following along, you're in the correct version of the engine. And Tim, yeah, take it away, man.
Okay. So, like Alex said, we're going to be talking about Destructibles today. I know this comes up quite a bit occasionally over the last few years that I've worked here. It's actually one of the first areas of the engine I started learning and just kind of messing around with. So I have a little fond place for it.
Yeah, I mean, you first got in here and we're like throwing physics questions at you left and right.
Yeah.
So you got pretty familiar pretty fast.
Yeah. Yeah, it was that, and then it fell right into lighting. So, but you know, that's another
That's
stream
a
another
natural
day.
transition. Destructibles lighting, you know.
I was like, I like these areas. Okay, so really, what I'm gonna start going over is, you may notice back here, I've got like this whole little project here that looks like content examples. It's not. It's actually been sitting around for a couple of years now, and really, it's got a bunch of settings overviews and things like that. It's been on my website as well. But before we really jump into a lot of these things, I'm just gonna go over Destructibles in general. What is it? How to create it. Clint, if you want to actually go back to the, because it's going to be a second before I get to that. Okay, so with Destructibles, we actually have, there's a couple of different ways you can create them. You can create them in the editor using the in-editor tools for Destruction Mesh Editor. And it gives you a whole wide variety of settings and everything that content example map that I've got walks through. Then there's also Physics Labs, which is it's a plugin that you can get through NVIDIA's website that covers creating, or it's a plugin that you can use for 3ds Max or Maya. And it gives you a bunch of different other options that you don't get with the in-editor tools that we have. So it's like you can do things that like do cutout mask. So that way you can actually have like this much differing kind of like more control over your Destructibles that you create. And then you also have the Voronoi.
Just kind of the standard.
Right,
like,
which is what we have in the editor right now. So, and then let's see here. So yeah, that's that part. Sorry, I get a bunch of notes here. I always keep notes with me just so because I tend to forget. But okay, so some of the limitations with creating Destructibles, I really want to talk about this before we really get into everything else as well. So I've got an image here, bring over. So one of the bigger things you have to remember, like when creating Destructibles, is it has to be a closed mesh. This means that you can't have any open face geometry. Usually in like 3ds Max, like if I'm modeling anything, I'm doing like box geometry modeling or box modeling, and I'm just kind of piecing things together. You can't really do that with Destructibles. They have to be a contiguous, like closed mesh. Otherwise, like whenever you go to fracture the mesh, you start getting these holes here, for all these different faces, because the like when the fracture happens, it doesn't know how to create that geometry for it. So
really quick, Pshernry, sorry if I got that wrong. Pshernry was asking what was the plugin again, and you said it.
Oh, it's
just the name of it, and if we wanted to bring the site up really fast, this is NVIDIA's.
Yeah, it's on
NVIDIA's.
NVIDIA's.
Just want to get into that.
Sorry, I'm just gonna have to actually just Google NVIDIA.
Actually, you know what? Google most answers behind the scenes also.
Wiki Unreal Destructible Troubleshooting Guide.
Oh.
See, this is why I do things like like why I always have these guides. It's like I write things down not for you guys, but for me.
and this is, by the way, this is linked in the forum post that's part of the promotion for this. So if you go to forums.unrealengine.com, you can also find a link to this page.
It's like I don't always tend to remember every little thing, so especially after years of being here. So, but if we go to Physics Destruction, here you can actually do the download. You can sign up for their developer network for free and actually download the latest plugins. They even have their older ones there as well for your different versions of 3ds Max or Maya. They also have Physics Labs. Or no, they don't have the standalone tool anymore. They actually have the clothing tool that is the cloth editor. That it's its own.
That's a separate one. Yep.
Yeah. So, but the whole thing's here, and they've actually got some of their own little tutorials and things to show things, show some of the games that it's actually been used with, and what's possible. Their documentation, which that image I originally had to this one, is actually straight from their documentation. So that is the NVIDIA.
Yeah, you can see little missing
um,
chunks.
But I guess to answer that part, so back to like when you're making your authoring your assets, making sure it's a closed mesh. If you have anything that has like really long, thin triangles, you're going to tend to run into issues. You won't always run into issues, but it's something to be aware of because sometimes like the solver, I guess, like whenever it goes to fracture it, it'll create like extra geometry that's just kind of split out, or it'll make a hole in a face that you really just don't want that. Also, planar assets, so it's like if you have like a plane with no back face, things like that just don't really work well because it's not closed geometry. Okay, so I can get rid of this now because I have my double images. Okay, so what I'm going to do real quick before jumping into this stuff, just let me go over the destruction editor real quick. So we'll create a very basic destructible. Close this.
Got like a random mesh in there.
Okay, so pull this out for a second. Okay, so I've got my static mesh here. If you right click on it and you go to create destructible mesh, what's going to happen is we're going to create our new destructible asset here, and then the destructible mesh editor will open up. So what you get here is just your initial base mesh that we've got. To go over to toolbar settings here, we have our fracture mesh, which is controlled by the fracture settings here, and we have our Voronoi cell count, which is the number of fractures that we're going to have happen. By default, it's set on 25. So whenever I hit that, it's automatically going to go ahead and fracture it. And then you get some other settings down here that allow you to give much more control over your Voronoi fracture. So you can change the UV scale of the inside of the mesh, which I'm going to expand it here. So as we explode the mesh, just like some of these inside here faces that are created, the UVs for there, you can actually scale those. You can do a UV offset. You get some tangent control. I'm not going to just read through all of these, but the one that's really interesting is like the random seed here. You can just punch in any value. So it's like if you don't like the fracture that does happen, whenever you do change that, we can go back and it'll fracture it a different way.
Oh, wow.
Just using a different Voronoi pattern.
Can I give this number to a friend and they get the same exact fracture
Exactly.
pattern?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's that's the power of having that random seed of value is like it doesn't matter. It's like so you can try different ones and come back to it and go, okay, well I like the way this one looks over another one, so I can always get that same value again. Okay, so the next setting, I'll come back to import chunks because I really want to show that one off. So when we fracture our mesh, we have here the preview depth 0, which is our original base mesh with no fractures, and then our preview depth 1. So another big difference between Physics Labs versus our destructible editor or in-editor tools is that we only give you a single depth of destruction. So you only get the one layer here. But if I were to bring something in from Physics Labs, I can actually, in Physics Labs, I can create up to, I think it's 5 different depths of destruction. So it's like you can if we think of like a wood plank, we could actually have it break in 2 and then have that break into further chunks and other and little splinters and whatnot. So and then further down you go, you typically want to offset that with like a particle effect. So
yeah, of course we want to kind of mask that we're breaking it like in such a
right.
a way.
And I mean too, it's like, you know, when you start fracturing things that much, it's like you have all these little pieces floating around that are still tied to one single mesh that, you know, you don't really want that many pieces just kind of in there. It's like you want to start killing off some of those chunks, but we'll get into that.
And this actually answers a question that came in from chat. Morlar16 was asking, so all destructibles require the physics plugin? No, we have we have this destructible system.
Exactly. The physics plugin, I do recommend checking it out if you have 3ds Max or Maya. It does have some really cool things. Their documentation's a little, you have to kind of dig through it. It's not like a step like how-to guide. So a lot of it, like when I learned it, was just kind of going through and watching YouTube tutorials, or either just playing around with it myself and trying to see what I could actually make. So, okay, so one other thing on this toolbar here is we have the explode amount, which depending, for something like the simple mesh, it may not be like a necessity to have the explode amount, to really see like any fine details. But like if you have something like from physics lab that has like multiple depths, it can really come in handy to really explode that a little bit more and see everything that you've got going on. Okay, so so now that we've kind of seen what the Destructible Mesh Editor is and kind of how it's working here, some of the settings over here, just to kind of outline the way I've broken down content examples, is I have, I go through the damage settings in their own little section. I have the flags broken up into its own section, hierarchy and depths. That way it's just kind of, it's progressive through these little settings because there's so many here. And I try to have an example to set up for each one. Mm-hmm. There are a few that are either bugged or I just never got around to actually working correctly. So those I kind of have blocked off. So and there's not really a good example. I think there's like 2 or 3 that are set up that way. Okay, so now I'm gonna just get rid of this. I'm gonna put this back over here, and then, all right. So y'all been doing anyway is like asking questions. So it's gonna probably take me a couple minutes to go through each one of these sections. So it's like if you have questions on sections, I'll kind of catch up at the end of the section. So it's like I have 5 sections total. So at the end, if you have questions, I'll stop there and I'll answer each question.
All right. So since this is kind of, I'll call this at the end of the beginning section, we have a couple in here that we'll just want to knock out really quick.
Okay.
And I know these are actually ones that are sort of high level, so I'm just going to try to answer these to the best of our abilities, guys. Normally, if we had Mike Fricker or James Golding or someone who's doing the like hardcore side of the physics or the engine, we could give them
I'm not on that,
specific answers.
I'm not on their level.
Are we going to have physics without PhysX someday, like GPU Open? Actually, what's interesting about that question is we have full source available to you, and I've actually seen some people who either disabled chunks of or stripped out chunks of the physics code we have to write in their own physics code.
I think I saw someone do that like with vehicles and like ripped out and like put Bullet in or Havoc or something like that.
And
so it's like people have done it.
I think the Kabounce team took out a ton of not necessarily like all the physics and stuff, but they took out a lot of the way that controls were handled because they didn't like it, and completely rebuilt some sections of that. But that's the power of having the source code for you. Is we're not. I don't think that you're going to see that coming from our side of things, but we're not going to stop you from doing it yourself. And the other one is, will these NVIDIA tools be built into UE4 with easier workflow in the future? We're not going to be building the plugin into the engine. It's better for it to be separated out as a plugin for people that aren't going to need all those hardcore physics things for their games, and you can just add it as needed. Same reason that Paper 2D is a plugin. Not everyone needs 2D elements, and therefore we compartmentalize sections of the engine out, and therefore you don't have to package everything in one big solid chunk.
Yeah. That's like, I mean, I would definitely love to see some of the physics things like in the editor. It's like there was actually a guy like a long while back, like a year or more ago, that submitted a pull request like where he'd actually implemented physics labs, like the full editor.
Oh yeah.
But it was just it's an undertaking, and I don't think it actually met code standards.
Yeah, that's another thing. Is
it was one of those things like where it's like it's like the guy gave me the link to the GitHub. I tried it out, and it's like there were some really cool things there. It's like I was really enjoying it.
Cool.
So I was like, it's definitely possible. It's a lot of work. I'm definitely not a coder, but
it's possible. We've seen people do it. It's not going to be perfect for every game, but if it's good for your game, then go right for it.
Absolutely.
Like I said, we want you to have the accessibility, and we're not going to stop you if you want to do something fun like that. Let's see here. Can destructible meshes be wrapped in an actor, such as a mining node that spawns ore on damage when fracturing the mesh?
Hold on. What's the question?
Can destructible meshes be wrapped in an actor? Basically, can you have a destructible mesh component inside of your blueprint?
Yeah.
And then, the answer is
yeah.
And then you would probably just do like.
Actually, I think I remember talking with John Alcatraz like a long time ago with some destructible stuff, and it's like he was hitting some performance issues just because it's all handled on CPU. And I think what he ended up doing is like he may correct me on this, but I think he ended up using like some instance meshes to kind of like fake the effect that he wanted. He had a destructible as the base mesh, so when it fractured, he would then crumble those chunks so that way they just went away and destroyed, and then what he would have is like he would spawn in a bunch of instances that kind of simulated the debris.
And that's that's a good way of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's a bunch of different ways. So like I don't always recommend like just using destructibles and like just use it. You always use the system and you try and work with it to get your end effect, but you don't always just want to rely wholly on that when you have other options that can kind of fake it and make it look the same way.
Yeah, I think that's actually the key word there is end effect. The end effect is what you're looking for.
So it's like, I mean, like we have modeling tools in UE4, but it's like, it's like, with BSPs, but, that's those tend to be more for prototyping right away. So it's like, while you can ship a game with them, you would want to go back and actually, tweak some of those. You already may need to, and like for your UVs for light maps and things like that. So there's always a possibility. So any other questions, or are we just gonna jump right in?
One last question here.
Okay.
Does it work on mobile?
Oh no, it does not.
Destructibles work on mobile.
I think it was on the Trello for a long time, and it's always been backlogged for mobile. I don't know if it's still up there or not. I know there's just really no Destructible work planned for it at the moment. So, but yeah, it's like something like that. It's like I have an example like at the end of the stream showing that's not in this content example kind of map that I'll walk through actually just using static meshes to kind of like fake an effect with some destructibles as well. So if there's not anything else, we'll just jump straight in.
Sure, let's just jump right into the next thing.
Okay, so this first little section here, it's a small section, like 4 examples. I'm not going to touch every example I've got in here. That's just going to take too long. But I've kind of highlighted like some of my favorites that I'll just kind of go through. Let's see here. And again, this isn't a content example map. It's just one that I made like back in December of 2014. Originally, it's like I said, I used to do a lot of destructible work, and I needed something that was just easy for me to look at. But it is on my website, and it's publicly available, and I'm sure Alex put it up on the forums as well. So
sure did.
Okay, so with this one, FBX custom meshes. This one's really cool because what you can do, and I've actually got some examples at the end. I'll show a little bit more in detail. Is you can get some custom destruction going for this without having to use the Voronoi fracture. So what this is you have your base mesh here, and then we've got a second custom mesh that we import, and we have it replace the destructible or the base mesh. So as you see, it's like it's got, I think it actually spells out destruction whenever it's going. So let's see here. Okay, so here's one thing too to know about that. It's like all those pieces as well, they get imported as their own materials. So you drastically can increase draw calls that you have there. So especially if those are using separate materials. So let's open up this real quick. So this is that original base mesh using the import FBX chunks here. It's like we can actually select whatever other FBX that we want. It doesn't have to be anything that's similar to this. It can actually just be anything. So if we look at the destruction depth one, we can actually see that it's got all these little chunks here from where it just spells out destruction, and that was imported as a separate mesh. So okay, so close that out. So whoops. This one actually isn't even a destructible at all, but it's animated destruction. This one fascinated me for the longest time because like I'm not an animator, so there are certain key aspects to animation that I wasn't aware of. But what this one is it's just a simulation I did in 3ds Max, and then I baked that out, and it's like all these are individual chunks, and they all have their own physics asset and everything. So it's like you can actually make them where they collide and do all this other stuff. But it's like if we open up the animation tools here, and we go to animation, all this was just a animation that I had simulated as like, and then imported as a skeletal mesh. But the biggest thing here, and the only reason I'm calling this out is like if anyone's doing like this kind of simulated destruction, is totally didn't know this as an animator because I'm not an animator, but originally when I would import these in, they would all come as like these separate individual chunks, but and it would be, each chunk would have its own animation, not in a single skeletal mesh like this. So the one thing I had to remember like was that Osman actually had told me about was like you have to group everything and then export it, and that made my animation work perfectly for what I wanted there. So it's just anyone who's doing simulated stuff like that, it's just something to. Okay, so
this actually answers quite a few questions people were having about, if I was going to be on mobile and I wanted to do Destructibles, like how would I do it? And it's like, well, you can pre-bake the animation out like this.
Yeah, especially, you can pre-bake the animation. One of the examples I have at the end, I'll kind of walk through that. Something else you can kind of fake through blueprints as well. Okay, so we talked briefly about destruction depth. Okay, so this one. So as you can see here, there's like larger chunks, and then you have these smaller ones that are kind of breaking off. They put a wireframe material on this one because this one was actually originally in the content example map we have now. So if we open it up, this is one that was created in physics labs. And then what you see here is we actually have 2 depths. So we've got this one cutout depth here, and then we've got another one that actually has all of our other ones. And then just some of the settings over here, which you'll be able to explore on your own, actually control a lot of how that interacts. So it's like we actually have support depth set, so that way, as it fractured, it's not fracturing the whole mesh all at once. You're seeing that you're getting these larger chunks, and then it's breaking away into these smaller ones. And all it is just I have the project here in game view, so you don't see a lot of these things, but it's just a radial force actor that applies an impulse to fracture it. So, okay, so if there's not any questions for this section.
We've got a couple of quick ones in here.
Okay.
Actually, let me just throw this out here. It might not actually be related to this section. Cardboard Katana had asked, can you fracture a mesh that has tessellation and displacement going on? I guess it's not related to this section, but it's still a good question, I think.
I've not tried it.
We'll have to get Ryan Brooks on here because he loves to do that kind of stuff. But I'm
seeing tessellation is like a material thing. It's like I'm not sure how that would interact with the destructible chunks.
Yeah, I'm sure that you could put it on there, but I don't know if it would always look the best when it actually breaks apart.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how that would interact.
Yeah, I have to say that one's probably a little bit risky for creating artifacts, visual artifacts with.
I mean, the way Destructibles are anyway is like they're almost like the subset of skeletal meshes. So it's like, for each, like you have your base mesh, and then when it breaks, it's like each of those get their own bones. So it's like if you exported like a fractured mesh, I think it was, you actually see all the bones and whatnot. So
and I guess let's see, one more question. Ryan 3266 asks, what's the difference between taking this route and using the NVIDIA GameWorks destruction, using the in-engine stuff versus downloading the plugin?
It just really depends on what your needs are. The Physics Labs gives you like so much more control over things if you need a very specific look than what you can actually get in the editor here. You can actually assign meshes to be like as trying to think of the right word, like if you think of like a wall, and it's got its beams in between it, and then you want like the outer surface to break away. It's like I think you can actually assign those inner beams like to be a static mesh or something like that. So that way it's like, again, I'm not an expert on like Physics Labs. I just know it from where I've messed around with it. But it's like you can do things there. It's like if you were gonna do that in UE4, it's like you can still have the wall break away as a destructible, but I would just set that all up in like a blueprint and then have the wall be destroyed. As I have the example I show it, kind of make a little bit more sense with that.
Yeah.
But, so okay, so I guess just move right along in here into this next section. So this one's going to go through the damage settings. Let's see here. I had like a couple in here that I was going to show off. See here, so damage threshold, and I'm not going to go into as detail as I was on some of the other stuff, but so damage threshold, essentially this one's the amount of damage that can be applied to your mesh that you want to have. So again, it's like this is I've got radial force actors here. I've got the bottom down here kind of outlines what the radial force damage is. So in our radial force actor here, you have the option over here for destructible damage. So since this one is not applying any damage at all to destructibles, it doesn't fracture the mesh. Whereas this one applies just enough damage to fracture it. If I select that, I've got that one set up to 1. So it applies the right amount of damage. And obviously, it's like if you go into the Destructible Mesh Editor and under damage threshold, you're setting the values at a higher value. It's going to take more force for it to apply that damage. Okay, so Another one here is damage spread, and I haven't got these hooked up yet, so it doesn't work on the button. But so what we got here is damage spread, and the one on the left here has no damage spread, so that means versus the one over here, which I don't remember what I have the value as, is 0.01, has a low amount of damage spread. So what this is doing is it's taking the amount of force that is hitting the destructible, and then it's spreading along those chunks. So it allows a single chunk to, it's the damage that goes out to any of the surrounding chunks, spreading, that damaging force to break it apart.
Yeah. What happens if you really crank that up?
If you really crank it up, it's gonna be like you don't even have like any support depth or anything to hold the mesh together. So
if it's like you're breaking some very fragile glass and you want the whole thing to like shatter everywhere, versus if you just want the one chunk of glass, like it's got like shatterproof glass, you only want like one particular chunk.
So it's like if I hit one point, let's just say in the middle of a wall, it's like how much of that damage is going to radiate out. So
Okay.
Okay, so let's see, your custom impact resistance is the next one we're going to look at. Not that one. Oh, make sure I get my numbers right. 2.5. I'll run over to here. And again, I don't have the thing hooked up. Okay, so custom impact resistance is a really cool one that allows you to, Alex was saying this on the previous one, it's like kind of like imitating glass. We can actually... for any mesh destructible that has impact damage enabled, you can set this impact resistance, and low values tend to act more like glass or like a surface that is easily breakable versus a higher value, which it takes more force. So it's like if we look at the ones here, you can see how the ball pendulum over here like swung right through really easily versus the one over here on the right.
You can see how much more force it absorbed.
Right, exactly. Absorbed. Good
Boom,
word.
look at that.
Yeah, so
that could be really helpful when you're designing a nice action-packed game and you want to make sure that, like this thing can, like whatever, you have like some big cinematic-esque moment where something big comes in and collapses, you can actually determine how strong the thing is it's going to hit and make sure it doesn't quite slam into the character and gives them a second to react.
Now, I will say you probably have to get into some physics math and stuff that's probably above my head, because like over here, I just tweaked values. On this one over here, I think I just grabbed the slider and just kept sliding until I saw something that I liked.
That's kind of how I do a lot of things too.
But it's like the physics ball here is like, we're simulating physics. It's, you can probably adjust some of the mass and other things. This is where it goes back to like game design type things, like where you wouldn't want to just say, okay, I'm gonna set all these settings and expect it to work for everything. It's like, you probably want to apply different damage values or something depending on the weapons that you have, or different things for your game specific. But it's these are just meant as easy, like simple examples to just kind of show off these things.
Yeah, you can set your numbers arbitrarily until you find the right ones that you like, or you can be already naturally good at physics, math, and just kind of know a rough estimate of what will work with what.
Okay, so with this one on damage cap, this one is actually just setting a top level that you want the damage to apply on that single hit. So what we have here is I've got a radial force damage, I've got a damage cap of 5. So like the one over here on the left, it's not good. It's going to fracture, whereas the one on the right, or that's a 0.5. It's not enough damage to actually apply. And I'll show some of these in practice, like at the end of it. So each time I go back and actually kind of touch that, you can see the radial force actor just kind of activates and moves some of that.
Damage cap 0, of course, means no cap.
Yep.
If you set it to 0.
Yeah.
That's not a multiplier, because I know that's going to.
Yeah, that one's definitely not a multiplier. So it's like if I have like a damage threshold of like let's just say 200, and I have a damage cap of 50, but I also do the flag, which I'll go over in just a moment in the next section, for accumulate damage. That means that I can hit this over and over again until it reaches that cap of 200 and actually cause it to fracture. Whereas like it's like, let's just say that I have like a weapon that I don't want to ever like cause any damage. So it's like if I have an explosion versus a pistol's like bullet, I don't want the bullet to cause any damage. So It's like I can always set a damage cap of, okay, it has to at least be this amount before it can ever cause any damage. So that way bullets can never affect, but the explosion will. So, okay, so all right, I got one last example for this one, and then we'll take questions. So 2.9. Whoops. Okay, so this one is fracture impulse scale. This one's really good for just this example shows how it's going to work, but if you think of like a large like wall that you have like around a castle and you're breaking chunks off, it works really more in a situation like that because fracture impulse scale allows it to kind of, well, as my example here says, push like some of the other chunks away from each other. So that way you kind of get this separation between the chunks rather than just kind of like all falling around or something like that. So it's like if we look, it's like the one on the right here has a higher fracture impulse scale.
Yeah.
So everything just kind of pushes away from each other, and it allows it to just kind of not just fall right in this one area. So that can make it really nice. Like if you have like some walls that you're just shooting a hole into, and the chunks just kind of fall down, and they're just kind of blocking the walkway still. If you have that fracture impulse scale, it can give you that little extra push without having to do anything.
It also seems to add a little bit of stylization to your world. Like if you really want to have that the last action hero kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger movie like effect. It's like just crank that impulse scale way up high, so every time you touch anything, it just like flies off.
Don't listen to him.
Do it.
You crank it up that high, it's just you're gonna have like meteors shooting out. It's gonna be a Michael Bay movie. Okay, so is there any questions for this section?
Yes, so we have a couple of questions here. It seems about importing, exporting, and performance and whatnot. Could you export the FPX from Blender and import the FBX chunks that way?
Yes. Well, okay, so you wouldn't import the chunks themselves. They would just go back to doing the... so let's just look at an example here. Let me come back to this. So we have our destructible cube that I had made. So in Blender, what you would do, or any modeling application, I mean, it can be you can do this with Max, Maya, Modo, anything that can export FBX or. So we have our base mesh here. And if I just go to import chunks, and then on the desktop I have my folder, parking meter, and then if I just do. I won't show that one. I'll show the parking meter one. Do that one. Now I've imported just, it's just using that FBX chunk, and you still get all the controls that you have over here, and it can be multiple meshes as well. So it's like if I just want to do another one, I can do the sphere damage one that I've got. Oh, I shouldn't have done that one. That one's going to take a minute. I'll come back to this in just 1 second. If you have another question, we can...
Sure, yeah, we can hop onto these other questions. So you actually mentioned, I think, an answer to this one before, but Janiscu7, or Yaniscu, I should say, asked, how about dropping a glass with different features like normal glass and tempered glass? And actually, I think that there's an example in the content examples for Destructibles where it's like you drop one Destructible and actually it shows a new shape is inside of it or something like that. But
that's the custom fracture.
Oh, is that custom fracture
yeah, I mean,
shapes?
okay, so
but that's different than I guess because he's wondering because you were talking about also the having support beams inside of a wall that's destructible and stuff.
And even those they would just be something that was not fracturable, which once this finishes, the chunk parameters actually allow you to have some of that control as well. So,
awesome.
Sorry about this. This is going to take just a moment.
All right. So, I've got other questions for you.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Any tips for baked destruction that turns into simulated debris? So, you've got like a bunch of chunks that we animated, like your one that you had there, and then you turn on simulate physics or something like that.
Okay, so with the animated one, those are just like any skeletal mesh. So and it's like I didn't have to actually rig it or do anything like that. That was just chunks that simulated and imported as a skeletal mesh. So it creates its own route, and then it just links out to the bones, or for the chunks, and creates the links there. But with that, you can have your own physics assets for each of those chunks. But I mean, you get the options of spheres, fills, boxes. It's like I don't think, depending on how the chunk is and everything, I don't think you would get the control necessarily that you would probably want.
Yeah,
But it's like you can always like switch things out in blueprints.
hot
It's
swap
like, I mean,
out
yeah,
stuff.
there's definitely ones that have done that, and some really talented artists I've seen that have made some really cool things.
All right. At least gives them. I think that puts them at least in the right direction there.
Actually, I really wish I hadn't have done that one.
I
I might just close it and reopen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So performance-wise,
Because it went quicker on my computer.
Uh-oh. No. Yeah, it was
alright.
just a
It'll be
kind of
alright.
a lot of chunks to it or something.
Yeah, that one did. Because I had imported that one earlier, so
Oh,
in
no.
the final little demo thing that I've got. I don't want to take too much time. So
Performance-wise, can destructibles be used instead of static mesh, or is it best to swap out the component to limit the amount of destructibles in the world? So I guess it's if you have like a rock in the world before it's a destructible, should it just be like a static mesh, and then when they come in to hit it, like just hot swap it, like we were talking about with the destructible?
I think some people have done that.
Yeah.
Where it shouldn't be an issue to swap them out, or even just do the hit before, or was it having the static mesh there and then swapping it out to a destructible on hit.
Oh, like on hit, have it convert itself into.
But
a
even then, it's
destructible?
like, yeah. So it's like, I mean, I've seen some interesting things done. So
Yeah. Okay.
Alright,
so that sounds like a solution. Just have
whoops, wrong way.
do your live convert at runtime. There you go. Wow,
Okay,
there's a
so-
much larger content examples map. There you go.
Oh, same one.
Oh, it's the same one?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the same one. I told you,
Alright,
it's just
then.
a lot of sections.
Jeez.
I told you I made this for myself.
I thought this was the actual content examples map at this point. I was like, yeah, it's
No, this
gotta
is
be because
this
it's got
is
so many sections.
this is one I got tired of always having to like make different projects and examples. So it's like I just made this mostly for myself, just so I had to have a reference all the time.
Yep.
And then I blame Lauren Ridge for any additional work that I did on it.
Lauren's in chat. She's gonna get you, man.
Oh, she'll always get me.
All right,
Okay,
cool.
so-
Cool. That answers those questions for now.
Okay, cool. I think I abandoned the guy who asked about Blender, but you know what? Your question will be answered by the end. I promise.
Oh, okay.
If not,
how to do stuff with that.
pop it up again. Okay, so go on to the next section real quick. Whoops. Okay, so this one we're gonna look at accumulate damage, which is what I talked about briefly before this whole like
yeah.
derailed thing.
Cool.
So this one is like I have. Did it not work?
No, you gotta hit it a couple times. Maybe
Yeah.
just slam the ball into it.
Wow. There you go. I
There
just
you
walked into it.
Boom, there it
okay,
goes.
so essentially this one is like I guess I didn't tweak the values low enough on this machine or whatever, but essentially this one was set up to take a damage cap. But so it's like we have a damage threshold of 5, then there's impact damage is enabled. So as the ball collides, it's got a damage cap of 1, and then it's got accumulate damage to true. So as the ball is like swinging and hitting it, if it doesn't hit hard enough the first time, it's going to take a little bit of damage, and then that accumulate flag is going to allow it to take on more damage and just keep compounding until it fractures what it needs to. Okay, so
Yeah, I think actually this is kind of funny that this one feature alone feels like a whole game mechanic.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, like you've just kind of set up like a really nice game jam game mechanic that I've seen a lot of times where they're like, yeah, we made so you have to like beat up a building really hard and stuff. So everyone take note. That's a good one.
okay, so here this one's asset defined support. So this one really quickly is just we've assigned some of the chunks over here to actually just be as support. So if it's making contact with anything in the static world, it's used to hold on to rather than just as the whole thing fractures. If that wasn't enabled, it would just drop those pieces. So quickly, next one. Next we have world support, which is similar. And I'm blanking on. So this one is environmentally supported. So these are with things in the environment versus this one, which was Jason. So this one was overlapping static geometry. See, this is why I make examples. So that way trying to think offhand. and brain is fizzing.
About the difference between like the world and local
Yeah, it's
support?
like these, so this one has what, world support depth, and debris timeout true. So it's like this one I think is still chunks are labeled as support. I was like, I'd have to open
there's
it back
one
up.
where you mark them, and then the other one is where they overlap with
Right.
objects in the world. But
Yeah.
we can just check it out and
Yeah,
see if that mesh has.
sorry
the,
for my blanking there.
We can just select the mesh and then like take a look inside of it, right? See if that's the one that's set up, and then we'll know which one's which for sure.
Oh, let's see here.
Yeah.
I know we're running a little bit longer than
No,
I
no,
wanted,
we're
but
good on time. We're good on
Okay.
time. Don't worry. It's all good, man.
I'm a nervous wreck always. So
But
okay,
we
so
can, yeah, we can check out the
so with this
support
one,
chunks.
put that away. Got debris, don't care about that. So we got world support here, and then that's enabled. And then we got our chunk parameters. So whenever you
Make sure you have them selected so you can see.
yeah, whenever you select these, so it's like this is preview depth 0. So if we go to preview depth 1, as like you'll see, it's still got the little blue. It's hard to see in this editor, but the little blue outline box is our base. But as we start selecting the chunks,
Yeah.
and if you have a bunch of small chunks or you have a weird camera angle, you may not be able to like select some of these. So this is really helpful where the explode slider comes in handy to be able to select some of those. So let's look at the ones. No, that side. You know what I think? I think the environmental support, I think that was originally where you didn't have to select them, but, and then the other one that we had,
The world and the environment.
the environment one, or the
Yeah, down there.
yeah. This one,
This is one where
where you select the chunks that you want.
and manually paint
And
them.
that one. Yep, there we go.
Okay.
That was the difference there. Sorry
All right,
about that.
So
That was
to clarify to everybody at home who was probably like, what just happened there?
like, man, this guy doesn't know anything.
No, we got the two. You got
I
the
know
two
enough to get in
swapped.
trouble. That's about it.
Yeah, I like that comment that you left on here. It's like, no, I know just enough about Destructible
that's-
to get myself in trouble.
Yeah.
All right, so what's the difference here between environmental and world?
Okay, so, oh, so
We know,
so,
but
yeah.
for them
So,
at home.
so with this one, we're going back to our flags, which is the asset defined support, not environmental world. Those were the same.
Oh.
The asset defined support. What we're doing is we're selecting the chunks that we want to be labeled as support.
Yes.
And then any chunk that's not labeled as support is not going to be supported when it's in contact with any other geometry. So whereas the world support will. So let's see here. Go ahead and get back to our examples and fly through some more. All right, so the next one is debris max separation. So 3.5. This one's a really good one too for like, especially if you have like multiple depths, if you're using anything with physics labs, I'm going through, and you have like all these chunks that are flying way on out. Okay, so I have this volume here just as a reference, just to kind of, so that way anyone looking at it can kind of get an idea. And I've set the distance away to be at that bounds. So as we go, it's like anything that hits that bounding edge of our debris will separation box values will automatically just be killed and destroyed. So it's just like a slaughter madhouse. So
Jeez.
it's just like we don't need you anymore. You can go away. So those settings can be found in debris, and then you get the max separation here, which so little in my eyes are not so good. I think it says what 400, but regardless. And then there's another one here for valid bounds, which is another example. It's a similar one, but you can actually specify much. Get a little bit more control on your X, Y, and Z, and you can actually move where that bounds is going to be for the min values and the max values. But that's a whole other example, and it's just kind of gets repetitive if I just keep showing that again. So, all right, next one's going to be, we kind of covered this already, but support chunks. So use valid bounds. Hold on, whoops. Crumble smallest. I mislabeled one. 310. Okay, so support chunks. So these are going back to like the one before, like where we talked about actually just assigning chunks and selecting them and then labeling them as support. That just shows that here as the one over here had no support, whereas this one, this last little minor chunk, just holds on for dear life.
Of course.
So.
Poor thing.
And then another one that was always like a really big one, like when I first started, I think it was like one of the first things I ever did with Destructibles, was someone had asked, I was like, how do I make a hole in a wall and keep certain chunks like from being destroyed?
Yeah.
So it's like you have this option here for do not fracture, which goes back to chunk parameters. So, which is this little window here. So it's like, I know I didn't probably give it the dedicated explanation it needed. So the chunk parameters here, there's 4 different things. One is support chunk, which we covered. Do not fracture, which is one we're going to cover now. Do not damage, and then do not crumble.
That's really useful to have that much kind of control over each individual chunk.
So, yeah, exactly. So it's like go here. So what I've done is, like in this example for do not fracture, this means that these can never take any damage and they're never going to get destroyed or break apart. So it's like these outer edge ones. You just enable do not fracture and then, yeah, that's all. Yeah, nothing here. Sorry. All the settings, it's like, there's a lot to try and remember.
It's all good.
Okay, so that was the last one I was going to show for this one. So if there's any questions, kind of build up.
Yeah, I think we've got quite a few questions built up for a lot of these.
Okay.
And mostly people, again, wants to reiterate, can they get a hold of this map somewhere?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Alex, you'll make it available in the forums. For the longest time, it's lived on my on my personal website.
Tim Hobson, UE4.
Just because it fell in like this dark abyss of maps that just weren't going to be released because they've never been finished, and it's like there's probably spelling mistakes in here. There's some that are just bugs that haven't been addressed, and it just doesn't make sense to have some of the settings explained and then just it's like, hey, this one that I really want isn't explained at all.
Because it was just like you said, a series of one-offs created through your Answer Hub work when you were doing support tech work, and people kept coming with the same questions.
Yeah, I think the biggest chunk of work I got done on it was December 2014 when everyone was on Christmas break, and I was just like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna clean this up because and it got pretty much a little bit of overhaul.
Yeah, and so to reiterate the name of your site.
Oh, it's Tim Hobson UE4 at snappages.com.
At SnapPages or dot SnapPages?
SnapPages. Here,
we'll bring it up here. And also this website will be located in the description on YouTube and also on the forum post at forums.unrealengine.com under the events section. I always like to make sure that there's lots of links everywhere and that we see anything that we're going to be visiting site-wise. Here we go. Jump on
this thing here. I've got a
UE4. Tim Hobson UE4.snappages.com.
Yeah, so if you go to the tutorial section, and then I've had it down here for the longest time.
Yep.
And then it just kind of breaks everything out, like, and it lists my known issues, which is those 2 that I think aren't worked. And then I think there's been a couple other things that just aren't even added to it at the moment. Because the majority of the work on this was done back in 2014, so.
Yeah, so there's a lot of older work in there, and we have people posting it in chat, of course. Thank you for that. Cool. So, question-wise, oh boy, this is a name. Okay, Dmitro Popov?
Sure.
Yeah, Dmitro Popov asks, any hint on how this would all work in multiplayer?
Nope.
Destructibles in replication.
That was one thing I tried tackling for a while, and Ian actually tried helping me on that.
For Destructibles
but networking is definitely not a forte of mine at the moment.
Yeah, we'll have to.
It's like I've seen some people actually do it, and it's like they've done it through blueprints. I think there's actually something on the content or the marketplace where someone set it up for, or at least I saw it in the forums talking about they wanted to release it. So.
Cool. We'll have to get someone. I know replication's been a hot topic, and we'll have to get someone on to do like some replication specific stuff.
That's one of the area of the engine I've just never really messed with. So.
Okay. Let's see. Greg Blast C5 asks, is it all good in the hood now regarding extended structures? As long as I've tried to use them, they've been kind of buggy, but that's a physics feature, I think.
Okay, so Yeah, we're talking about form extended structures.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Clint, to put you on the spot. If you want to go back to the editor, I can show this one real quick. Form extended structures. So what this allows you to do is take two destructibles, and as long as they're butted together, they actually act as one. And I really don't like talking about bugs necessarily because but the problem is, okay, so it's like they work together, but they can never be fractured again. So that's the bug that's in right now, and that's the issue that's been with this one for a long while.
Known issue, I
Yeah,
see.
it's a known issue, unfortunately.
All right.
I think Ian actually reported it the first time. That's how I came across it. Because like I entered another bug, and then he was like, "Oh yeah, I entered that one a long time ago."
Cool.
So.
So at the very least, that one's something we're aware of. And
Okay.
hey, maybe we'll start a fire under that one because it's being brought up again. Let's see. Non-value user. That's not kind of harsh way to call yourself. Non-value user asks. I think you have value, but
Yes.
okay. If I have a blueprint, let's say a car, can I apply a destructible mesh on my car on the fly? Are there destructible mesh support for blueprint components? And we kind of covered that a little bit earlier.
Yeah. I mean, you
well
can add them
when
in
we were
blueprints,
talking
and
about
yeah,
it.
it's like yeah, you can do add destructible mesh. I mean, just like you can add static mesh, there's an add destructible mesh node as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that should be possible. I mean, it just depends on your game and like to what point you're gonna go with it. But yeah.
And this is funny. Voz WC asks, can we have a stream just like this but for lighting? We did.
Yes, we did.
Yes, actually, if anyone here is interested in learning more, I thought this was a good opportunity to bring up that we actually do live streams every Tuesday and Thursday. We do training on Tuesdays. We do Thursdays. We have like news and like other updates and features. But also, if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see that there's a large archive of these. And in fact, one of them was we had Tim here on previously to do lighting guides and troubleshooting. And he's bringing it up there so you can actually see what it looks like. But yes, that's actually a good question. We have that one under control there, and people are now linking him to where you can find that.
Okay, cool. So I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, you don't have to worry
Okay,
about
cool.
it. But if any of you are at home are watching this archive and are wondering about it, yes, you can just search through YouTube and it should be pretty easy to find.
That one was a good overview. So it's like I want to come back and do more. So.
Let's see. And also you can go to our forums. Our forum posts always have a post for each of our live streams where there's ongoing discussions about stuff that had happened, and we even come back and answer questions we couldn't get to on the live stream. And that's my spiel.
Okay.
All right. Next question on here. How costly can some of these different destructible methods get? I guess the best thing to say is, like, what is the most expensive thing you've ever created performance-wise?
Don't crank the fractures up to, like, 1,000. I mean, because you have to remember you're just simulating physics, so it's like you have now 1,000 simulating objects. That's all being run on the CPU, and it's like I know there's some other performance things like async, destructible, something in the physics stuff, and it's like that's something I've not messed with too much. So I don't know if I'd be 100% help there. Okay, so mind if I just move on?
Oh yeah, if you want. If you've got more sections, then please.
Yeah. There's 2 more sections, and only covering a couple in these, and then some more practical examples.
Cool.
Okay, so yeah, there we go. Oh, big explosion.
Yeah, waiting for the explosion.
Okay, so this one's support depth. This one actually comes up quite a bit. This year, so what you're seeing here is the radial force actually just applying damage. But where support depth actually comes in handy is it allows you to set the depth of destruction, or the depth layer. Let's see here. So we have our 2 depths. We have depth 0 and depth 1. And then come back up here. Nope, not there. Sorry. Under hierarchy depth, we have our support depth, which you can enable here. And so what this does is says that whenever destruction happens, it has to apply the damage to that depth, or at least starting at that depth, for it to accurately work. If we do it at 0, then as soon as the mesh receives any damage, it's automatically going to crumble because all the destruction or all the damage is being applied to that single depth. Support depth just allows your chunks to start sticking together and holding and keeping its form and breaking pieces off, which is super helpful. when trying to create like a very stylized or a very specific look. Okay, so next one we're going to look at is fracture effects and particle sounds. I did disable sounds on my editor because I didn't want to have to, keep going back in and out of the play mode and having to hear that. But fracture effect sounds, and then particle ones over here.
Yeah, if you wanted to sound like shattering glass versus
yeah, right. So it's like with this one, it's like we had so whenever a chunk breaks off, you can have a particle assigned that'll play through. So if we come over here and then under hierarchy depth, expand the options here, you get all these depth parameters, and then for depth 0 and then depth 1, you can actually go through and assign these different things. And then we got effects, same thing, where we can assign a particle and a sound, and all these are, you can just go through the editor and find one that works for you, or if you have a specific one, same with particle effects. Really easy stuff. And then another one too, because I've seen this one with going to be a little bit of lighting.
Oh,
so cast shadow. I noticed this happening with stuff I was bringing in from physics labs, like where it wasn't casting a shadow, and this one like eluded me for a while. It's like, oh, this has to be a bug or something like that, but it was actually there's a checkbox.
Oh, of course there's a checkbox.
Yep. Nope. And of course it's...
Do you have to have the box selected?
Maybe.
It's like one of those like small things that you didn't think about.
Oh man, it's going to be in here somewhere. And you know what? It's in this list somewhere. And for whatever reason, it's not bringing it up. But let's see here. But yeah, it was essentially just a checkbox that was not enabled on import for the mesh itself to cast shadows. And I was just like, that one was just kind of like, oh, this is a major bug for me, not for anyone else. Okay, so, all right. Any questions on this section? Otherwise, I'm gonna dart out of here.
The particle systems on there cause someone to perk up. So the particle system implementation.
Is it Luos?
It's AirTech.
Okay.
But I think it was just confused because it's when you break something, it has an effect, and that's how you add.
And I actually have it assigned in like you'll see a little bit more in like the example I have at the end.
Yeah,
it's because I assigned the same particle effect. It's gonna look really weird because it's gonna be all orange on a white wall, but you may be able to see it a little easier. Okay, so and then all right, so we're just gonna jump into this last section before I go into practical stuff real quick. All right, so. Uh-oh.
Lewis was just very impressed. He got a shout out. Hey, Lewis.
Oh yeah.
We're aware
all
of
the
you.
time. Yes.
I see you.
Okay, so with this one's actually a setting inside the level itself, not inside the Destructible Mesh editor. Large chunk threshold. It's like I talked a little bit earlier about like shooting a hole in the wall and you have these chunks and maybe it blocks your character from being able to progress or walk on by. So what you can do is large chunk threshold in your details panel allows you to set a value for what should be considered a minimum size bounds for like a chunk to actually have collision with your player. So while it still collides with the world and works, we have here is like, okay, so it's like I can collide into that chunk, but these smaller ones is like, I may not want to have to like step up on or collide with each one of those. So large chunk threshold allows me to set a value, a minimum value, so that way I can just walk through some of these chunks without having to worry about like constantly bouncing up and down or going around them or getting stopped by them. So let's see here, and that was just a little setting here, and it's like this one is like I think it says 57.5 was just the value I ended up using. But it's like if I were to tweak that, and let's just say 25, I think is the default, yeah. And when it fractures, it's like I now collide with all these pieces, and it's like I can get hung up. Like right now, it's like I can
collision in physics.
Yeah. And I guess we can show you a little console command here. pxvis.
I thought you were going to be like Fus Roda.
pxvis space collision. if you have a lot of chunks in your scene, it's going to really kill the FPS.
Oh my lord!
Because it shows you all these collision assets. So it's like we can actually see the convex holes that are created for all these chunks and everything, and just all collision in the level. But yeah, it's like sometimes that's a good way to kind of like just look and see, debug some of your stuff, or and there's like a whole physics debugging tools as well, but this one's
let's break some stuff and see how it all looks like as it's breaking up in front of our eyes.
All right, so this one, let me go back and enter that again.
Oh yeah, that's a fascinating view.
Okay, so
PXViz collision.
All right, so it's like here's our original mesh, and it's like you notice you don't see all the fractures because it's got that base mesh, and then as soon as we fracture, everything breaks. So yeah, they can give you a really good idea.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Okay, so and I've got 2 more actually in this little section. Okay, so this one's one that used to come up quite a bit. Sleep family.
I'm sorry, this is a really strange setup of like wandering into like, what is this? Okay, go on.
Before we have a little context here.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so it's like I've got 2, it's like the cube falls down, it fractures, and then I have my yellow one and I have my red one. And what happens with the one on the left is that one is actually set to sleep family normal versus sleep family sensitive. So what this is determining is how quickly something goes to sleep that is simulating physics. So whenever, so if I have it set to sensitive, it's going to be woken up more easily. It's going to go back to sleep more easily, or take longer to go back to sleep, and stop simulating physics. The one thing I did want to talk about in here, because this was added well after I had set up this map, is we have custom sleep threshold. Oh, and actually, you know what? Let me just get onto the physics section. Probably easier if I can read it.
Which one are you looking for?
Physics. There we are.
There you go.
Okay, so there's under the advanced rollout here. No, not there. That's custom step on. All right, it's in here somewhere. There's a, you know what? Okay, so sleep family here. Good, that gives me everything I need. Sorry about that. We have the 2 default options of normal and then sensitive, and then we have custom. So if I select custom, and let's just say, I did test this with a value. Let's just try 750. That's a really high value. What's going to happen is you're going to notice that the Destructible, once it fractures, is going to go back to sleep much more quickly. And then often it's going to leave, because it's such a high threshold, you actually get these chunks that are left awake. But that can be a good way to kind of tweak really quickly and get a sleep value that fits your range if the sensitive and normal ones do not work for you. And then one last thing, and I think Alex will appreciate this one.
Go on.
Go on. Yes. Because this one was added after the fact as well. So we have NavMesh bounds volume.
Oh, really?
Yes, really.
Yes, okay, you have my interest.
Okay, so we got.
It looks like you already have one in the area.
Oh, do we?
Yeah, because that one's small, and then you already have NavMesh.
Well, you know what? I'll get rid of that one.
There you go.
Okay, so if we go to our cube over here, you've actually got a setting. Notice how it's got no. It's not blocking anything there for the NavMesh. You have the can ever affect nav, and then affect navigation.
You have to have both.
Oh, you have to have both. Okay.
You can have it be like can ever, and then like the other one's like turn it on and off as needed.
There you go. So now our Destructible can affect that. Okay, so that's pretty much all I had for this section. I'm gonna take some questions, and then I'm gonna show a really quick level.
Well, what happens if you blow it up and like how's the NavMesh affected?
Well, you can't see the NavMesh when I'm playing, right?
You have to simulate.
But I have to be able to. Okay.
Yeah, you can still set it up.
You know what? All right. You just really want to see this in action?
I do. I really want to see it in action.
All right. I'll put that on simulate physics. Put it up here.
And then just hit simulate.
And then you're making me have to change a bunch of stuff.
It's just the one little thing.
Just the one little thing? Okay. Okay. All right. Make sure it fractures. Save that.
Cool.
What are you trying to say? Oh, it's because I got that other instant open that was trying to import all those chunks I couldn't close out.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Whatever. It'll use it for this moment. Okay, so...
Yep.
Simulate.
Ah, interesting. So when it actually goes into destruction mode, it stops like affecting navigation.
There is a checkbox. I remember that was... See, you're making me test things that it's like... I just knew there was a checkbox there for that.
Okay. So, but actually that's what I thought it was, because I used to use that previously when I wanted to cut off areas until someone blew open something.
Huh.
So I actually have like a village of AI guys, and
I want to say that
one of them will blow up in a destructible mesh, and when it does that, it changes out.
There's got to be something somewhere else, because I
navigation.
remember it, like being chunks, like spreading apart and actually still updating the mesh, I guess. Okay, so if there's any question, I'm going to take those real quick before I move into the other. And then I got one final thing I'm going to show, and this one won't take near as long as everything else has.
Let's see here. Can the chunks that we've put to sleep there wake back up if we hit them with force?
Should be able to.
Okay. Let's see here. And does UE4 support all features from physics lab? Example, retime, fracturing, and it's not all of them, but it's a lot.
Yeah, there's okay, so like there's a lot of settings in physics labs, like you can't do cutout meshes, you can't use like mask for those cutouts, you can't do like a custom slice. It's pretty much limited to, for runaway, a single depth. Yeah, there's no real-time fracturing. That would be amazing though. But procedural mesh, it's like that was one thing they showed. It's like, I mean, that's not destructible, but that's, slicey slice.
Oh yeah, the procedural like slicing and all that. That's still a really impressive feature.
Yes,
like
Osman's little table, man. Like when he's sitting there just holding it and it's just like slicing in VR. It's like, it's like, oh, that's really cool.
If you guys aren't familiar already out there, check out the instant static mesh slicing. Feature. You can just kind of Google UE4 instant static mesh slicing, and I trust me, there's like a bunch of people making awesome stuff.
Yeah.
And chopping it up. We actually do a couple of live streams where we show you how to make them yourself. It's a lot of fun.
I think there's even a content example with it too.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. There should be quite a few things that use it.
Sorry if there's not, and I just confuse a bunch of people.
There's some sort of example out there.
Yeah.
There's always an example out there. Let's see here. Okay, I think that's about it for right now.
Okay, so in this last little bit, I'll show these first. These are using the... Okay, so I briefly, or not so briefly, talked about FBX chunks and being able to import, like, the power of that earlier.
Yes.
And why it's just really cool. And I'm going to cite a game here that is like a game that I've dumped a lot of hours in, like Grand Theft Auto. As like... If anyone ever plays it, you'll notice this right out. So a practical example for FBX chunks is going to be like my little parking meter that I have here. Because the way they do it, from just looking at their content, it's like I don't know that they actually use physics labs or NVIDIA's tech or anything like that. It's just, but you can create a similar effect. And let me get out of simulate mode here. All right. So I've got my parking meter, and then it's like, if I shoot it, there it
goes.
I actually had that one set up on like accumulating damage. So that one actually is, it's got like an accumulate damage or a damage threshold of 200. You have to shoot it 4 times. A damage cap of 50, so that means 50 divided by 200, and then you get, hey, I did math. Hey, I just want to show I can do a little bit of math.
Good work.
Simple math.
Gold star for you.
Okay. Oh, I better get a gold star. Okay, so it's like I shoot it once, twice, 3 times, and then the 4th time's a charmed. And then all it's doing is just like I have these particle effects, and then it's just swapping out the mesh, and then it's falling over. It's like you'll notice that in like GTA did it a lot. So it's like you hit a light pole, it hits, and then it immediately changes to this damage version, and then it falls, and it changes to another damage version. It's not like it's actually, this whole like real-time damage thing or anything. But I think these are like really cool kind of practical effects that you can do with it. Just some other like goofball ones I had. Like this one's a sphere, and it's like if I shoot it, it just has a bunch of spheres inside of it.
What?
So it's like it's just...
What is this even?
Yeah, so I talked about earlier, it's like, it's like you get a material for each one of these, so there's a lot of chunks.
What is
Again,
this?
This is the one that took so long to import earlier, and when I was just like, whoops, I shouldn't have done that.
But that's how you could do like that parking meter that you had there.
Yeah,
once
yeah.
Once it explodes,
Yeah,
you just set up the LOD where one of it's like full of change, and so like explodes and change goes everywhere.
yeah. You can totally have just like or change, or you can just do like a particle effect that has like little change just kind of like spouting out. But like with this one, it's like the reason I set this up is like one, just to show off is like you know, that you need to be mindful of the number of like assets that you do import, like these chunks, like because you're importing a single chunk for each one of these, and unlike our Voronoi fracture and it, you know, all those chunks getting the same interior material or using the same material for the base mesh, you're getting material for each one of these. So that's just something to be aware of. And when you go to author like any of these types of things as well, it's like if you're gonna do multiple ones, these have to be individual objects inside of your 3D modeling program that get exported to the FBX. Otherwise, like it's like if I did, like just say like these top 3 spheres here, if I just imported those or all these chunks and I left those as a single attached asset inside of my modeling program before I exported, they would import as a single chunk. So those 3 spheres would be a single chunk.
So like when all the individual balls blow up, they'd be like these weird 3 that are just oddly stuck together.
Exactly. So
I got you.
But the explode slider and then this here. So, but yeah, it's like, I mean, you can just like this one. I had like a teapot inside. So
there was a teapot in there the whole time.
So
what's in the box? It was a teapot.
Yeah. But okay, and so for the last thing I'm going to show here before we just kind of finish up with questions is this is one that I did. I saw someone on YouTube and someone on the forums was just talking about this, and I think like one of my free learning Fridays, I'd spent like maybe an hour or 2 or something like that on this, and it was just kind of like trying out different settings and what worked. And it's like, so I made a brick wall or I made a brick asset and then I assembled like a wall here, and then I've got the only destructible part is this white wall here, and then everything else is static mesh. So it's like if I shoot it and I can shoot like a hole through, and then it's just like I just have these chunks that just kind of like are these static meshes that now simulate bricks. And it's like the reason I showed this one is just that, you know, even though the majority of the stream has been about destructibles in the editor, it's like there's ways to accomplish go ahead.
I just wanted to can I
oh, you want to shoot? Yeah.
I mean, like you gotta show that off. I mean, I'm gonna want to shoot something once.
There you go. And right click and you can shoot explosions.
Yes. Oh, the power.
But I mean, the thing here is like the outer wall is a destructible. The inside is just a blueprint with like all these static mesh bricks that I've made that are just simulating physics as soon as they're awoken. And that's all it is. And it's like the only thing is the outside bricks. I didn't have those simulating physics that way. Those aren't.
Okay. Fus Roda.
But
that's too much fun.
But
okay.
there's
take that away from me.
One thing I'll show with the setup. So it's like if we. Okay, so I'm just going to drag a copy of this out actually. So again, this is just a blueprint with a bunch of bricks, and it's not even a destructible, but it's just these are just simulating physics. But this right here, the wall itself is actually destructible. So, but with this right here, as I shoot it, it's like those are just they're just objects simulating physics. But the destructible walls there kind of help contain a lot of that. So that way, it's like that force, like you don't get the bricks like shooting all the way up or anything like that. So it's like I just think it's a really neat example to kind of shows like things you can accomplish, by using destructibles as an add-on to kind of help facilitate your in-game like destructible needs.
Yeah, they end up kind of playing the role of sheetrock in a way.
Now, with the static mesh thing, I'm gonna show one thing that I kind of learned like while I was doing it. Not really learned, just kind of like example playing around with. So if I look at my brick here, I go to a top view, and I zoom in, and this is going to be so hard to see. Actually, you know what? I'm going to close that for a second. Let me. Top view. Oh, I didn't have collision. Okay, so Oh, good. I can see the collision really well. So, let me zoom back out. Okay, so you'll see my collision box here. I've got it scaled down just a little bit, so that way it sits inside. And the reason for that is like, if I actually had those, and you know what, I'll just show it as a practical example. Collision, add a sphere box, or collision box. So I've got the box and it actually matches the geometry for my brick. And yeah, continue. Okay. If I don't get the effect I really wanted, like, you see how everything just kind of clumps together and just kind of, it's not as fluid, like with the bricks kind of falling out. That was one thing that I just kind of learned, like, while I was messing around with this, was just like, you know, if I scale that down just a little bit, it's just enough that it can allow it to look a lot better with the result that I get. That one still looks awesome, but that's pretty much what I had to show. So if there's any questions, we can kind of
cool. We have a couple questions here. Just to reiterate to everybody, yes, these all of this stuff is available on Tim's website for you guys to download. Tim Hobson, ue4.snotpages.com. It's on the tutorials section. Just scroll on into the tutorials. And yes, the links will be up in places like people are in need of this pretty badly. It's a really awesome example here, by the way. So they want to know, just to reiterate on this wall that you've built.
Yeah.
So that's like 100 plus static mesh components.
Oh yeah, there's a lot there.
Physics. So it's not necessarily the way you would do it if you want it to be performant with like a ton of stuff going on. In a single player game, this isn't going to kill anything in the modern world where we have, you know, pretty decent hardware these days, actually.
Okay, so with those being static meshes too, like the one thing just to kind of get into like some rendering side of things, like so
because they're wondering about performance of this thing.
Yeah. Like for our machines, for what I was testing on, it was not so bad. So it's just something to show off. Here, stat, FPS, because I knew you guys like that. Like this scene in general, just because I got a bunch of stuff in here that, get rid of those. Might grab me a little something extra back. Maybe not. So I think it's sitting at 67 right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, as I'm shooting, it's like I'm really not. I mean, it goes down quite a bit. So it's like, I mean, there's things there you can do. Like, again, these are all just simulating objects that are set to with start awake isn't enabled. So as soon as they're hit, they just automatically are woken up. So it's like, depending on the amount, you know, people with more blueprint savvy than I could go through and, you know, set only the objects to actually receiving damage in an area to wake up, or you know, something more specific than what I've got. Again, this was just a simple exercise that I did, just trying to recreate something that I saw someone on YouTube have, or the forums.
Yeah,
so.
I remember the first time I ever played a game that had this kind of feature too, and it's always an impressive feature to see. But even back in the PS2 original Xbox era, it's always like a balance of performance and how much you can actually destroy in a scene. The game, by the way, it's called Black. I don't remember if you remember.
Yeah, I remember that game.
Yeah, like you could shoot off it was all the different individual bricks in a wall.
That was predecessor to Killzones, right?
Yeah. It was from way back with all that.
Yep.
And I remember it being like in any game where you have like a lot of destruction, you'll always inevitably find those things where they actually make the walls that are indestructible and all those things too. So it is always a trade-off.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, I know the Battlefield games do that heavily too. It's like, you know, they have some really cool kind of destruction things. And it's like, you know, if you just start breaking apart the effects that you start seeing in these different games, you can see how they're kind of like manipulated to work. And it's not always just like one system that is doing the brunt of the work. It's, you know, these whole like different sets of features, you know, that kind of combined create this effect that's really cool. And it's like particle effects, I think, are really something good to have as well, you know, for these types of things, you know, because they can mask like
so some of the particle effects can be straight up like explosions.
Yeah, it's like, so for instance, if we go back to like
particles,
like the wood plank example, you know, it's like I wouldn't, you know, have like little splinters as like a really low down destruction depth, you know,
like
it's like
chunks of
it's like I would actually just you know, do a mesh particle there and and have those interact with the world, and then they fade and they go away, and you don't have to worry about them anymore.
Yep. So a lot of people in chat are also asking questions about. I think we can kind of wrap a couple of these questions as far as how do I when I do destroy chunks and they get small enough and they get blown up enough, like how do I get rid of them, make them fade away? Can I just make them scale down at the end of their lifetime? How to cover these kinds of things up? And
I don't think there's that type of control for it. You can use some of the timeout, the debris timeout features. There's an example that's got that in my little level for debris timeout, whereas like it receives damage and then chunks will start to they won't fade out, but they'll pop out. So
all right, so and yeah, I guess the way to kind of take control over those sort of things are particle effects and trying to make it so that when things take enough damage, they do. There is an option for if something takes enough damage, it'll just eventually like
so crumble smallest chunks. That's what I was going to talk about. It's like I got an example for that one as well. That so essentially, whenever you shoot the wall, so instead of having those chunks fall off, you could actually just spawn in other chunks, which I think I had actually said John Alcatraz. I think he did something like that. Where he was spawning in instances, so it's like you're just destroying all those chunks and crumbling them, like on hit. So,
alrighty, let's see here. Next question: would it be possible to shoot bullet holes through a wall destructible up until a fracture threshold, or would it need to be done with a mask? And I think this is actually probably a combination of one, the threshold, and two, you can actually set up the material. To actually do offsets. There's actually a couple of good examples now of bullet holes where it actually does like a vertex-based offset. I don't know how that looks on a destructible mesh.
Yeah, I don't know either. I would say if you need that specific effect and you can't achieve it with a destructible, I'd say that's probably a good example where you could do like have your static mesh, where you're actually doing those type of effects with the material work.
Yep.
And then when you actually need to fracture it, you're swapping in the mesh that you want to use. I've not set up any kind of practical example like that, but that would be the way I would start investigating, at least to look at it.
That makes the most sense. If you look on forums.unrealengine.com, there's actually a couple examples of people doing basic little offset techniques. I think they're using the blueprint render targets, so they know exactly where they hit, and then they can do like little bump offsets. Like we were using it for water flows and stuff, but someone just straight up made bullet holes. Looks great.
That system is like so powerful.
And it looks really, really, really good actually. And I'm sure that if you did a combination of that plus when you hit a certain threshold, you convert it to the destructible mesh, and just let that fly everywhere. It would look really good in the end game, especially if you throw a couple of particle effects in there too. Cool. So next question in here. Sorry, we've got a couple of questions coming in through chat, and actually we're running a little bit tight on time, so we're going to do one more question, and then we're going to have to defer everything back to the forum so that we can answer them there. Let's see here. When you get more chunks, can you come up with problems with lighting with them? I guess if the more chunks you have, do you get any problems with lighting? What kind of lighting problems can we expect with destructible meshes?
You can probably see, I think it's like this one tends to come up sometimes, like where if you don't have like a good like if you have like a very base color surface, you usually see some of that kind of light fades and like these artifact patterns. I never really messed with them to the point. So there is one as well. So I remember this one happening a lot on, and I covered some of this in my lighting stream that I did previously with pre-computed lighting and the volume lighting samples. So when a destructible fractures, and if pieces get far away enough from each other, some of those chunks, because once it fractures, it's like all the pieces are tied together. So as the root gets away from where the other chunks are, even if they're sitting on a surface, they'll be pulled with it. And if they're pulled into a different lighting sample area, they will light differently than what they were previously. So, like for instance, like if someone has like a floor and you shoot a hole into it and you've built lighting for this level, like in the area below it has really dark lighting samples. As the chunks break away and fall and that root hits the bottom, where those darker samples are, it's going to blacken that whole mesh or darken that whole mesh, and not make it look exactly the way you want. So.
All right.
Yeah.
We're coming up on about hour 30 mark.
Yeah, I ran a little long, didn't I?
No, it's good. It's a good amount of knowledge. So we're going to call it day for right now, but as always, please come to forums.unrealengine.com so that we can answer any questions that we didn't get to on here. I'm going to try to gather the ones that I have out of chat to hand over to you.
Cool.
You can all see these examples that we've shown off here either by following the links below on the YouTube archive once I have the full description and information up, or by going to the forums again. And finally, please make sure to hit subscribe, follow, like, whatever format you're watching us in. Hit all those little social buttons that they add around the corners so that next time that we come online, you'll know and everything will alert you and all that. So we'll see you all next time on Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Chance Ivy, my lead, is going to be here as a guest. For once, not actually to co-host, but as a guest to talk about Robo Recall's mod editor. So that should be a lot of fun. And we'll also do like a brief GDC recap because it was really exciting and a great deal of fun. And by the way, if anyone from GDC is watching, hi guys. And we'll see you all next time. So bye.
See ya.